Hey, what is going on, guys? So we are right at the tail end of December right now, and what I wanted to do for the last video of 2017 on my channel is give you guys 10 ideas for starting out 2018 more productively. And you know what? I don't think we really need a whole lot more preamble than that, so let's get started. Tip number 1, if you have not done this already, try using a habit tracking app in 2018. And there are a ton of these out there. My personal favorite is called Habitica because it basically turns habit tracking into an RPG-like video game where you get stat boosts and weapons and gear and go on quests, and you can even partner up with people who will keep you accountable. But there are also a bunch of decidedly less nerdy options out there, including Momentum and Today, which are both on iOS, and Loop, which is an Android exclusive. I find that using a habit tracker is really useful for me because the act of marking down when I actually do a habit creates a streak, and when I look back on that streak, I don't want to break it. As Peter Drucker once may have said, what gets measured gets managed. Tip number 2, and this one is really simple. Try experimenting with pre-planned blocks of uninterrupted single focus time on your calendar. Now, we've talked a lot on this channel about the power of focusing on one task for a long uninterrupted period of time, but a lot of times it's really easy to convince yourself that more urgent but easier tasks or less important tasks should be done right now. So if you start your week or at least your day with a plan that I'm gonna say, do my homework from 2 to 6 p.m. and do nothing else, then you're more likely to do it and you're more likely to focus only on that task, which is difficult. All right, tip number 3 is to start an accomplishment journal. This is exactly what it sounds like. You're keeping a simple record of everything that you've done either on a daily basis or maybe on a weekly or longer basis, depending on how much effort you want to put into it. But I find this practice to be really useful because as you get older and as you get into more of a schedule, whether it be with school or work, the days can start to blend together. Everything becomes a routine. And when this starts to happen, you can start to feel like you haven't really accomplished anything in a while because your brain has sort of filed it away, and that could demotivate you. But if you have an accomplishment journal to look back on, you can see that, yes, you actually have accomplished a good deal. Now, my Impossible list that's over on my website, College Info Geek, is a form of an accomplishment journal. I basically mark off any time I achieve something really big that I set out to do. But my suggestion here is actually that you try doing an accomplishment journal on a daily basis. Essentially, as you finish tasks during the day, write them down in a note on Evernote or your note-taking app of choice, or on just a scrap of paper, and then at the end of the day, or possibly at the end of the week, review them and see what you did. And this can actually have benefits beyond just looking at the checked off items on your to-do list, because as you probably know pretty well, a lot of times tasks come up in the middle of the day and interrupt you, and things that you didn't anticipate just happen. So by keeping a record of all these things, you're gonna have a more accurate picture of what you were actually able to accomplish. And when you're going through your review sessions, that more accurate picture is gonna enable you to make better and more intelligent changes to the way that you work. Okay, so you probably saw this 4th tip coming, but in 2018, you should make a lot more time for sitting on the couch, eating Doritos, drinking Mountain Dew, and playing Halo. Just kidding, you should make a lot more time for exercise. And yes, this is a pretty cliche tip, but a lot of people don't prioritize exercise, especially when they're ambitious. Their work takes up all of their hours and they just don't make it a priority. Now, it's also true that when a new year rolls around, a lot of people get into their heads that they are finally going to exercise consistently this year, and maybe you're thinking that. My one recommendation here echoes what I talked about last week. Start small, restrict your time scale, and don't bite off more than you can chew. Because when you start the new year, you have a lot of motivation and you might not have a whole lot on your plate, so it's really easy to stick with a goal. But later on down the line, when stuff starts to get into your way, your schedule starts to get a bit more busy, that's when your self-discipline is truly tested. So if you set a goal that stretches your capabilities and challenges you a bit, but is still doable within your schedule, even at its most challenging points, you're going to stick with it. One additional thing that I'll mention here is that if you want to exercise more regularly, it can be very helpful to sign up for a class at your school or your rec center. And this could be a class that teaches you a new sport you haven't tried before, which can be really fun, and which I did with ice skating, or it can just be a workout class. In either case, signing up for a class gives you 1, a community of people who are doing the same thing as you, which is a lot of fun, but 2, an obligation that doesn't exist just in your head. You're not relying only on your self-discipline, you now have other people who are expecting you to be there. Tip number 5 is something that you can take advantage of while you're on winter break or you're not otherwise overloaded with tons of classes and homework. Take some time to redesign your living space or your room to take advantage of the 20-second rule. If you haven't seen it already, I did an entire video a while back on the 20-second rule, and I'll have that linked in the description down below. But essentially, the 20-second rule is all about increasing the difficulty and the time that it takes to get into the things that you don't want to do so often, the bad habits, and reducing the time and the friction that it takes to do the things that you want to do more often. So if right now you play way too many video games, maybe put your game controllers in a drawer somewhere, or maybe even take the cord out of your PlayStation and put it in a closet. That way it's kind of a pain in the butt to set it up. And on the other hand, if you want to read more often or maybe practice an instrument, buy an instrument stand. Put your guitar right where you can pick it up and play it within 5 seconds. Or put your book right on the table so you can walk in from class, grab it, and start reading for a bit. Anything you can do to reduce the friction between you and a good habit is going to reduce the willpower required to remain consistent in doing it. And the same is true of avoiding the bad habits. Tip number 6 is to start looking for regular parts of your work process that you could either automate or make more efficient. For example, I recently set both of my credit cards to auto pay, so every month I no longer have to log in and pay them manually. And another thing that I've been doing on a regular basis is that when I start noticing that I have to go to a folder on my computer really often, I will pin it to my quick access toolbar so that way I can easily click it instead of having to navigate through the entire tree. Now, one word of warning here, not everything that you do is a candidate for automation or even more efficiency. And actually there's a really good comic over on XKCD called Is It Worth the Time? That essentially breaks down the threshold at which you should actually start thinking about spending time automating something rather than just doing it. Though, I'm gonna be honest, sometimes I just like to automate things for fun. And if you find that fun, then do that. Tip number 8 is to go and disable all the notifications and badges on your phone, or at least most of them. In the past, I'd always unconsciously let apps have notifications turned on, and they'd have badges turned on, and eventually my home screen would turn into this mess of badges and little red numbers up in the corners and distractions. And I really don't want to be giving that much attention to my phone. It should be working for me, not sucking up all of my time. So at one point during this year, I went into my phone settings and I disabled basically every notification, every little sound, and every little badge on the home screen that I could, other than the ones that were completely essential. And speaking of things that are essential, or rather non-essential, tip number 9 is to take the apps off of your phone that you don't need, or otherwise block access to them. For example, my friend Martin actually went into his ad blocker settings on his iPhone and disabled basically every single site in the world except for language translation sites. And doing this eventually changed his brain's automatic response whenever he got the urge to look something up. Rather than getting distracted on Safari and probably clicking a bunch of links he never meant to click in the first place, he just made a voice reminder of it. And then later on, when he was at his computer, if it was still important enough, and it often wasn't, he could look it up. For a less drastic example, I've often had email apps taken off my phone, I've often had social media apps taken off my phone. In fact, there are certain apps that I only have on my phone when I'm traveling. Essentially, I don't want to have access to those apps on my phone because access to them while I'm trying to work represents a mental burden. Tip number 9, again, because I realized I accidentally skipped 8, is to identify the time at which you regularly consume media online and replace it with reading. I think it's pretty safe to say that most of you are like me and you have certain times of the day where you just automatically go to Reddit or you go to Facebook or you go to Twitter. And these times are probably not all that valuable. And you also probably don't read as much as you'd like to. So by consciously identifying these times and then maybe scheduling some reading time during the exact same times, you'll start to avoid this unconscious social media consumption. And finally, tip number 10, when you're setting your goals for 2018 or whenever you set goals, make sure that you prioritize them and understand which of those goals is the most important one. Doing this is absolutely crucial if you want to remain consistent on those most important goals, because inevitably you're going to run into absolutely chaotic days where you just don't have time to do all of them. And when that happens, or when you're feeling demotivated and you just don't want to do anything, you can think back to what you've prioritized and you can tell yourself, I'm going to do that no matter what, and these things that are less important I can let fall to the wayside. That way, while you may derail on certain things, and you can always get back on those things later, you're always going to remain consistent on what's most important. Now, one additional thing you should do this year while your motivation is high is establish an online presence for yourself. And whether you're looking for an internship or maybe a full-time job or applying for a scholarship or just looking for a place to build a portfolio for your art, the first step to establishing that online presence is eating cheese.
What is?
And the second step is getting yourself a professional domain name. You can see mine over at thomasjfrank.com, which I got in college and which actually helped me to land an internship. And as I progressed in my career, I've redesigned the website a few times to match my progression. Now, if you're ready to lock down your own domain name, the best place on the internet to get it is Hover. Hover has over 400 domain extensions for you to choose from, ranging from the classics like .com and .org to more interesting ones like .limo and .ninja. And unlike a lot of other registrars out there, they don't have any annoying upsells or pop-ups during the sales process. It's super easy and you can get the entire thing done in under a minute. Once you have your domain, you can also use Hover to easily connect it to the web service of your choice, including Medium and Squarespace, using their Connect feature. And they also have a tool for setting up a professional email address, so if you wanted to say thomas@thomasjfrank.com, well, you can't have that one, but you could have one linked to your domain. So if you're ready to start establishing the online presence, give Hover a try and get 10% off your first purchase by going to hover.com/ThomasFrank, which you'll find in the description down below. I want to give a huge thanks to Hover for sponsoring this episode and supporting this channel. And as always, guys, thank you for supporting this channel by watching. If you enjoyed this video, you can hit that like button, and you can also subscribe right there if you want to get notifications when I publish new videos. You can also get a free copy of my book on how to earn better grades right there, and check out our latest podcast episode where we recap the year right over there. Lastly, you can watch one more video on this channel by smashing your face into your phone right around this area of the screen. And other than that, I will see you in the next video.